Sam Shaw from Wall Street Mastermind. I'm here today with another client interview for you guys. Today, I'm excited to have Sandalina with us, and she just recently finished her summer internship recruiting process, and she has an amazing story. Definitely not your typical candidate for investment banking, and so I wanted to get her on here to talk to you guys because I think a lot of you could honestly really benefit from hearing about her experience, and maybe it'll even inspire you to do things you weren't even thinking about doing before. So, Sandalina, I want to thank you for taking time to talk to us today.
All right. Thank you so much, Sam, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. To start out, maybe you can just introduce yourself a little bit and give people kind of a sense for like kind of your background and your profile.
Yeah, definitely. So I am a community college transfer, born and raised in the Silicon Valley. I am currently in my first year at Berkeley as a junior, at Berkeley Haas, double majoring in business administration and applied mathematics at the moment. That kind of wraps up my professional profile. Instead of in my terms of my personal life, I'm a Pakistani American, Muslim woman as well.
Awesome, got it. So you transferred, I guess, like let's go back to the beginning of kind of this journey for you. So obviously, so you went to community college for a couple of years, then you transferred into Haas at UC Berkeley, right? Um, and I think that was right around the time when you decided that you wanted to do investment banking. Is that right? If I'm not mistaken. Okay. And then so kind of like take us back to the beginning, like so you just transferred, you decided you want to go into investment banking, and then like what what brought you to Wall Street Mastermind, I guess? Like what was your situation at the time?
Yeah, great question. It's kind of an interesting story. So I knew I wanted to go into finance even when going into community college. I was toying with the idea of investment banking, but I don't think I truly knew exactly the extent of what it was. And I also wasn't sure if I'd transfer to a target school for banking. Therefore, I remember I actually in January of 2020, so almost a year ago now, I remember seeing on LinkedIn something, Sam, that you had posted about investment banking recruiting, and you were talking about how you like to help students out. And obviously I'm a bit of a skeptic, so I wanted to follow you first and like see what your whole thing is about initially. So I'd followed you, I think, back in January, February, and I really like the content that you're pushing out and the articles that you're writing about your experience with immigrant parents, and that resonated a lot with me.
Hmm.
So then I reached out to, I remember talking to you about how much that meant to me, and how I'm looking to transfer. And when I'm deciding upon transfer schools, like I would really appreciate your input. All said and done, I decided to go to Haas, but I still wasn't sure if I wanted to sign on with Wall Street Mastermind yet, because I just want to try it on my own and see where I could really get.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, even especially as a transfer, even with all the resources that I had in a virtual space with the shortened time span, again, as a transfer, it was really hard. I actually remember waking up one morning where I stayed up late the night before to compose a bunch of emails, cold emails to a bunch of people I'd found on LinkedIn. And I used the Boomerang extension to preset them to send in the morning. Woke up in the morning, 60 to 70 of them all bounced back. And I was just in tears. And I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't even get a call with somebody. How am I supposed to break into investment banking within literally the next few months? Like, this is just not going to happen for me.
Right.
So I was pretty close to giving up. And that's when I said, okay, I have been seeing the stuff that Sam's been pushing out on LinkedIn. There must be something real here. He has such a high success rate. So I finally caved in. I said, okay, let's schedule a consultation with Sam and see how this goes.
Yeah.
So that's what brought me here.
Got it. Okay. So you, like a lot of people, you want to try it on your own first, which is a very kind of normal human reaction, I would say. Um, and then it didn't really work. And then that's when you're like, okay, fine, I should probably get some help, right?
Yeah.
Understood. And then so you came to Wall Street Mastermind. I guess we set up a call and we just kind of talked about your situation. Like you said, you're naturally kind of a skeptic, right? So I'm sure there were a lot of things that you were maybe somewhat skeptical about in the beginning. Like for example, if I just have to guess, like sometimes people talk to us and they say, oh, it sounds too good to be true, or oh, your success rate sounds too good to be true. So like, what were some of the skepticism that you might have had at the time, and kind of like how did you kind of overcome that? I guess because obviously eventually you ended up joining the program, but like, what was the thought process there?
Yeah, no, this is funny. I actually just saw a lot of posts that you were saying pushing out about, chats from students about how excited they were and happy they were. And I was just thinking to myself, I was like, there's actually no way this is real, because like investment banking is so hard to break into. I don't know how he's getting so many kids through the door. Like this just doesn't make logical sense to me, because I've heard so many things about the high barriers to entry. So it was honestly disbelief. And what really pushed me over the edge is, okay, I was like, I can get a free 1 hour consultation. I lose nothing in this process. I just gain a valuable perspective. And I pride myself in my ability to read people. So during our call, I was totally reading you, and I got such a good read on you. And I felt that you were very honest.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that you had a really great story for why you pursued banking. It definitely helped that we grew up in the same hometown a few decades apart, and that you went to Haas as well. So
Yeah.
that there was all these reasons that trust had been established. And you were just very kind and warm. And I really appreciated how genuine you were. And I just got a good gut feeling. I think that's what it was. Plus the client testimonials. I was like, you can't fake that. That's just real.
And now you're one of them. So
Yeah. Who would have thought?
for all of you guys who are listening, Sandalina is not a paid actor.
No,
uh,
I wish I was.
Kidding aside, guys. So then, all right. So we talked. You felt good about it. You came in the program, and then so like, what exactly changed after you came in the program? Like, what do we do in the program with you? Like, what were we doing? Like, well, because another popular question we get is like, what are you guys gonna do with me that I can't do on my own? Like,
Mhm.
what's really the value add here? Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah. Great question. I think I'll walk through my story to answer that question and kind of the steps that I took. I remember, Sam, I showed you my resume and my past experience, and I was proud of it because that got me into Haas as a transfer. So I was like, oh, it must be decent at least. And I remember you looked at my resume and you're like, oh, that's cute, startup experience. Oh, how adorable. We need to get you a real internship. And I was like, okay. Okay.
Pretty sure I didn't say it that way, but
No,
okay.
I know. No, I'm exaggerating. No, I'm totally exaggerating. No. You're really sweet about it. But it was funny because I remember seeing your face like, oh, this is nice, but let's do better. So I was like, wow, okay, I guess there's a lot of room for growth, which I'm excited for, I guess. And I remember you telling me, if you start with me now, you will have a private equity sort of internship that could help you with banking within the next couple of weeks. And that's why I kind of, get pedal to the metal. I was like, okay, let's do this thing.
Yeah.
So I signed up. Within 48 hours, I had redone my entire resume with the directions from Wall Street Mastermind, and my resume looked so much better. And then once I had that, I was able to reach out for internships to get interviews and phone calls within the next couple weeks. And I had I think 8 to 10 offers from different firms all over the country, virtual, of course, with COVID. So I was so excited because I just did not at all realize that these opportunities were there virtually. I was so bummed because I thought, there's nothing in person, I can't do anything. But I remember, Sam, specifically you saying that while people are scrambling for internships in the real world, in your program, kids are actually thriving in the virtual environment because we have more opportunities. So that was really great, learning about the resources from you, Sam. And then I think after that, I kind of just dove right into interning, and also adding that to my resume, and then also starting the network. And this is where the video modules that you have really come in handy, in addition to the weekly office hours where we can come and ask you questions, in addition to the fact that you're basically available 24/7 by Slack, and you respond ASAP, which is really great. So I think all of that together helped a lot. The one thing, though, that I will say is you cannot come into this program and just expect it to be some magical experience where it just happens out of thin air. You have to be self-sufficient and you have to have the discipline to put in the work. Sam basically says, here are the resources. I've laid it out in an organized format and done all the research for you. Now it's up to you to really take advantage of these resources.
Right.
So just know that you will put in work, but it will pay off.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, which is, we always tell people like, yeah, there's no magic bullet, right? And it's not, this is not that, if that's what they're looking for. The best analogy that I can think of is it's like competitive sports. You're trying to get into something that's very competitive, and you're the athlete, you're the contestant, and I'm just the coach, right? Like I can't play the game for you. I can't show up to practice for you. I can't put in the work for you. You have to put in the work, but as the coach, my job is to be here and coach you and teach you how to do things in a more efficient and effective way, and give you the best game plan and best strategies to maximize your chances of winning. But at the end of the day, the person who ultimately controls the outcome is the player, right?
Yeah.
And I'm in more of a supporting role because that's all I can do, right? And so yeah, it's absolutely, like if someone, that's the one thing that I loved about you too, though, is that when I talked to you on our first call, um, I could tell just like how driven and motivated you were, like, cause like sometimes people might think like, oh, like this person went to community college and there's a stigma or whatever. Like not everyone goes to community college because they're not hardworking, they're not good students or whatever, right? Like sometimes it's just a smart thing to do, especially with how ridiculous the college tuition is nowadays. Like it's like the more it's a logical thing for some people. Like I would say for the really motivated, driven people, they're gonna succeed no matter what, right? And I knew you had that in you, and so I was very confident that with those qualities and with the guidance that we would be able to provide you, there was no reason why you wouldn't be able to thrive, as you said, right?
Thank
Um,
you.
and so that's that. But you make a great point. It's like you come into the program, nothing's gonna get handed to you on a silver platter. Like we can't make it easy for you. We just make it simple, right? It's
Yeah.
like getting that relevant experience in private equity as your, first internship or whatever. Like it doesn't have to be hard. Like it's just you just
Yeah.
have to know what to do and where to look and and that's it, right? And how to interview and how to network with these people. And so we'll teach you all that, right? And then you guys just gotta go out and do the work.
Yep.
Um, so you did that private equity internship, and then you started networking. And then what happened after that? Like, because I'm sure a bunch of other stuff happened leading up to, ultimately your summer internship offer, right? So what else did you have to
Yeah.
do in between?
So during that time, that's when again I was going through the resource that you provided and was understanding more about how to more effectively network and how to kind of get more responses to cold emails. And I also realized that I should call more upon my warm networks. I tap into my alumni network. And I remember watching kind of the examples that you had of how to really connect with these people. And what I really appreciated about the way that you teach networking is you really emphasize the importance of nurturing the relationship and growing it and really learning from it and benefiting it, having a mutually beneficial relationship, as opposed to, I feel like a lot of people have made it a bit cut and dry, try to get an internship and use people. And I really don't like that mentality. And Sam, I really like the way that you emphasize that
Right.
kind of nicer approach. So that was huge, I think, just understanding that it from that perspective.
Right.
And then from there on out, it was really just emails and phone calls for months on end, really just scheduling phone calls. I know we do weekly check-ins in the program, so it was really helpful to kind of see like where other people were at, where I was at, and I was looking at it, for a healthy comparison, saying, okay, like I need to be doing this much more, right? Or I'm at a good place right now. This is good. So that was really helpful. And I actually, oh yeah, there was also the database of that kind of helped us have people to reach out to as well, within different banks, with different email addresses. So that was proved to be pivotal, in addition to that.
Yep.
And then really simultaneously studying for the technicals. I think there is such an unnecessarily, again, high barrier to entry when it comes to some of these access to these technical questions. And it's so much simpler than I really thought it would ever be. It's just when you're looking at it from the outside, you're like, oh my God, DCF, like LBO, like what does that mean? What does that mean? But what I really appreciated, again, about the video modules and the way that you teach it in office hours as well, is you simplify the concepts so much to like the rudimentary, fundamental like definitions, and really helps us understand and also not feel stupid in the process. Like we feel like we can grasp the information
Yeah.
and build on our own. And you have lots of cool ways and like little study guides and cheat sheets and review sheets. And I found that super helpful before my super day. I remember being like, oh my God, like I'm a little rusty on the technicals. I need to brush up. It's been a while. So I was going through those cheat sheets. I was, obviously you have to do your own work. I was making my own note cards and also like doing that to kind of make sure your concepts were sinking in.
Yep.
But literally would not, I even remember on my first call with you, I think you asked me to run some sort of depreciation expense through the 3 statements or some question along the lines.
Yeah.
And I got it so totally wrong. And I thought I was good at accounting before that. And then I remember by the end of the program, I did that same problem without even, like I could do that in my sleep now, you know?
Right.
That's just one example.
Right.
But basically, yeah, the way I ended up finding my current opportunity, I actually called upon, I remember I found somebody in the Haas network that put me in contact with an alumni who put me in contact with another alumni who was at a boutique bank that actually was able to push my resume through to the short list, despite me as a San Francisco Berkeley Haas student being up against New York Ivy League kids. I actually was able to, thankfully, with the help of the person at the bank, beat out hundreds of kids. So that was huge.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing. There's so much good stuff there. I want to kind of like unpack some of that. So one thing you mentioned was obviously networking. That's a huge part, right? You probably sent a ton of emails and phone calls for the past, I mean, well, you came in the program in June. We're in November now. So, it's been almost half a year, right?
Yeah.
During that time, I mean, just to give people a sense of the scale with which you have to network at, like, do you have a rough idea of maybe how many emails or how many phone calls you ended up having?
Oh, I think I have like a massive Excel sheet somewhere to keep track of all of that. But if I had to guess, I'd say I probably had like at least like, if you include that, I'd say somewhere to 30 to 50 phone calls in those 6 months, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about each one 30 minutes to an hour, and then you follow up on with them, like that's a lot. And probably pushing out like obviously more emails in that a week because it takes a lot to get responses from people.
Right, because not everyone you email is actually going to have a conversation with you. And so you probably sent out, if you had 30 to 50 conversations, you probably sent out hundreds of emails.
Yeah,
Right?
easily.
Yeah. Okay. So really it's important on that end to have like a good system and process to go through that, because otherwise, if you don't have a good system or process, one, it's super time consuming, and two, it's just hard to stay organized with all of your contacts and stuff, right?
I agree.
And then the other thing that you mentioned is like the weekly check-ins in the program and how it was helpful to see where other people were at. And so I think that's one thing that people don't really think about a lot is the difference between going through recruiting as a part of this program and kind of like what a lot of people do, which is they go through recruiting on their own, is that environment is a huge thing, right? Like being in the right environment and surrounding yourself with the right people who are, like-minded and also trying to accomplish the same things that you are. And then more importantly, like, are helping each other out. Like there's a community where it's not this cutthroat thing where everybody's out for themselves, but like you know this, like even in our Slack channel and our Facebook group, like our clients are constantly sharing, whether it's intel with each other on different firms and timelines or interview questions or sharing resources with each other. Like just being a part of that it just makes recruiting so much more bearable, right? Like I never tell anyone that recruiting is fun, because it isn't, but it can be lonely if you're just trying to grind it on your own. And also like I think like learning in a group environment, the biggest benefit that I found for our clients, because before what we did was in a Slack channel, anytime someone had a question, they would just like DM me, right? And then I was the only one who saw that question. And then at one point, like a light bulb went off, and I switched it up, and I say, hey, let's create some channels where when people want to ask certain questions, they can ask in these channels so that everyone else can see it as well. Because I mean, part of it was for my own sanity. I realized
Right.
that hey, people are asking me the same questions a lot of the times, but part of it is like, look, like a lot of times being able to see what questions other people are asking is also super helpful, because other people ask questions that you didn't even think of. But then like once you see the question, you're like, oh, actually I have the same question, right? So like
Yep.
what's the answer to that? And that just accelerates your learning. And so like, and I think it's a similar reason for why a lot of people they join these finance clubs or investment funds or whatever on campus. And a lot of these funds have really good acceptance rates into different banks on Wall Street and stuff. And that's great if you're in a club like that. And we have clients that are in clubs like that too, and they still find this program to be beneficial. But if you're not in a club like that, or because not all schools have clubs like that, or even the ones that do, like it's super selective and hard to get into, right? Um, then this is kind of just like the exact same thing, but maybe even better, perhaps, right? And so I think like that point on environment, like I can't understate just or I can't overstate how important it is, really. Like you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, right? And
Yeah.
everybody's winning together in the program. Like it's hard not to win. Like it's hard not to have that belief, because you look around and everyone else is, by the way, doing the exact same things that you're doing, because they're being taught the exact same strategies and systems or whatever. And you see their wins and you're like, oh wow, well if they could do it, why can't I, right? And
Yep.
that belief is like half the battle,
And everybody's starting from the same place, which is, you know, square one. So
right?
it's really nice to kind of have that environment and camaraderie. It's not nobody's out to get each other. It's like a little family virtually. It's cute.
It's like our own little fraternity or sorority or whatever.
Yeah.
Co-ed obviously, but
Yeah. And I know as
um
a transfer, I didn't have the chance to really join those clubs, and it's those clubs that you're talking about are super great, but I personally believe they're more beneficial when you join them as a freshman or a sophomore, because it takes time to groom you up for a junior year recruiting season. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And for people that don't have opportunities to join those clubs, like myself, this was the perfect thing to get me to catch up with the
and
other folks.
honestly, yeah, I mean that's a great point too, which is a lot of those clubs, they also, it's a little bit selfish, right? But like they also only want to take younger students because it's easier to for those students to get into like investment banking and jobs like that, right? And they care about where they're placing people because it makes their organization look more prestigious and selective and whatnot. And so that's why a lot of them, they're like, they don't want to take a junior because by then it's so late in the recruiting process, they're not
Yeah.
confident that they'd be able to help you get a job, right?
Yeah.
And so you essentially have to figure out another way to make it happen, right? Because you can't just give up, right? Um, and so I think that's a great point there. And then the last point that you brought up was like on the technical side. Uh, there's like an easy way to learn technicals, and there's like a hard way to learn technicals. It's like most people, what they're doing, I think, is memorizing hundreds of answers from interview guides or watching financial modeling courses that are 1 to 200 hours long, literally, and still not being able to answer the questions the way that they're asked in these interviews, right? Whereas, like for us, I'm glad you said it was just like we just simplified everything, right? I think the key word is simplify. Is like it's not rocket science, but for whatever reason, a lot of the resources out there have made it so much more difficult than it needs to be. Like it's like financial modeling course is a perfect example. It's like, hey, on top of learning what a DCF is and being able to verbally explain that, let's also teach you how to build it out in an Excel spreadsheet and learn all the Excel functions and shortcuts and this and that. And like, guess what? You're never gonna get asked to do that in an interview. Like, why are you doing that? like, like,
Right.
Why are you doing that? So you're only doing that because the company that's selling those courses, somehow they've conditioned you to think that that's what's best for you. When in reality, it's not, because it's causing you to spend so much unnecessary time on something when you could probably repurpose that time and go and get a better GPA, or go out and network with more bankers and actually get those interviews in the first place, or go and do a private equity internship. Like, all these things are just competing for the 24 hours that you have in a day, right?
Yeah.
It comes down to how you utilize that limited amount of time that you have to prepare, right? And so, I mean, like, the technicals, our technical content, people are always surprised to hear this, like, it's 20 hours.
Yeah, seriously, it's not even that long. I mean, if you pause and like, want to take more notes and stuff, like I can totally see how it could take a little longer, but just the learning process the first time around it's way more concise and to the point than a lot of the PDFs and guides that I was looking at on my own earlier.
Yeah, we've had clients that joined the program and they had an interview within like a week of joining the program. Like, oh, my super day's in 7 days. It was like their first day in the program, and we're like, all right, well, I guess, and they knew zero technicals, and then they spent the next 7 days just going through our technical modules, and they were able to get the job, right? So it's like,
Wow.
if you really wanted to learn this stuff quickly, like, it's doable, right?
Yeah.
And with how early recruiting is nowadays, like, it's always an urgent matter, right? Like, there needs to be urgency around it. But ultimately, so it sounds like you networked your way, like, not even through a first degree connection, but through like a third degree connection. This first person referred you to the second person to a third person. So obviously you crushed it with networking, and then you got this interview and you went there. Um, were you like the only kid from the West Coast there, or like it was all like East Coast Ivy League school candidates? Or did you actually get to meet the other people? Oh, you did the interviews probably over Zoom because
Yeah, it was all virtual. So I actually don't know too much about what my competition was, but I'd heard from the banker that like there was, I think, like 400 applications, primarily East Coast kids, also Ivy kids, obviously, because East Coast, and they only had 4 spots. I'm sure there must have been, I think in the short list, I do know there was at least one other person from Berkeley Haas, but that's all I know of, just one.
wow.
But yeah, so they're, yeah.
So basically, they took like 1% of their applicant pool, right?
Yeah,
And
I
that's the
can't.
thing. Is like, I always tell people, it's like the acceptance rate at a lot of these banks. I throw out this 1% number. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit higher. Some banks it's 2%, 3%. But regardless of what it is, it's not a high number. People don't believe me. They're like, nah, like, you're just saying that to scare us or whatever. It's like, no, these are like actual numbers. With the bigger banks, they hire a lot more than 4 people, but then they're getting tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of applications. So it's not really any easier, right? What do you think it was that really made you stand out from the rest of these competition? Like, in terms of the interview side of things, because I know obviously, hey, you got really good at networking. That obviously helps you get the interview. But once you get to the interview, though, so knowing technicals, I think that's one, right? Is there anything else that you felt like just really made you stand out? Because look, like, let's be real, coming from a community college, transferring to Berkeley versus other people that maybe, went to an Ivy League school this entire time and started way before you, like,
Yeah.
how did you overcome that? Or what do you think it was?
Honestly, I think it really just came down to personality, and warmth, and really making an effort to connect with the interviewer, and not in that cheesy way where you like overdo it and are kissing up. That's also just really irritating. It's a very delicate balance, I think, of staying professional, but just smiling a bit more, and like just and I wasn't perfect in my interviews. I think I messed up a couple technical questions somewhere in there, and that was my own fault because I didn't study enough. I didn't review enough the night before. So yeah, and the guy was super nice about it, because when I slipped up, I had a positive reaction. I was like, hey, this is my best guess. Yada yada yada. But please help me out here. how should I approach this, you know? And I think that went a long way. And just, I think just being honest in yourself, which is so cheesy again, but I really think that's what got me through just having that positive aura.
No, I think you're absolutely right, which is that's another great point, which is people put so much emphasis on learning the technicals, and it's important. Don't get me wrong, it's important. You have to know your stuff, but at the end of the day, what's even more important is on the behavioral side of things. They want to see what type of person you are, right? Your behavioral interview, how you tell your story, how you let your personality shine through. That stuff that can't be taught. Like they 10 out of 10 times a bank would rather hire someone that they really enjoy being around and that they think is coachable, and they can teach you all the technicals, right?
Yeah.
But like if you know all the technicals and you're just a boring candidate, or your story is just not very interesting, um, there's no overcoming that. Like
Yeah.
so I think like part of it is also probably just you did a good job on your behavioral prep, and you were able to kind of like present yourself as the type of candidate that they would be excited to have as part of the team,
Yeah.
right? More so than anything, because I bet you, like you said, you messed up on a couple of technical questions. I bet you some of these other,
Oh, 100%. There are probably people that aced it, but
yeah, and then you still got the offer over them, and they're probably thinking it's not really fair, but that's the reality of it. Is like so many people, they spend all their time on technicals, they barely study the behaviors, or not study, they barely prepare for the behaviorals, and that's where that's actually a huge mistake, right? So um, that's awesome though. Like obviously you got an amazing outcome, and you overcame some pretty insane odds. So I guess
oh yeah.
my last question for you is, what's one piece of advice that you have for maybe other students now who are in a similar situation as where you were before? Like what's something that you know now that you come out on the other side, and maybe you didn't know back then, and you, as you're thinking about it, if someone had told you this back when you first started, maybe it would have helped you tremendously. Like what would you want to tell people?
I think there's a couple things. The first thing is like kind of similar to what you said earlier. It's not rocket science. I think you really need to believe that you are capable of it. I hit again, I told you about that low point where all my emails bounced back, and I was just convinced that I didn't have the competence intellectually to do this. I just thought, maybe it was an accident that I got into Berkeley, like maybe, but really, really do stick it out, because there is a light at the end of the tunnel if you keep pushing. And in terms of if you choose to join this program, which I would really recommend because it is kind of changing the trajectory of my life as we speak, I would recommend treating this program as a class. Like pretend that there's a letter grade. Pretend that the super day is your final exam and your life is depending on it, because you know what? Your lifestyle, the lifestyle that you will live out of college actually depends on the work you put in right now in this program. If you want a 6-figure salary, if you want to live in, a big house one day, support your family, or, buy all these material items, if that's what you want to, which is totally fine, you put in that work now. So if you slack off now, then you will be just average leaving college, which is also fine if that's what you want. But right.
Right.
Yeah, just really, I think it's really important to take this program seriously. I kind of, honestly, part of me wishes I put in more time during summer, because I spread myself thin with internship and like 5 classes and doing this program.
Yeah.
But it ended up working out in my favor somehow. But if I could go back and do it again, I would study even harder.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you make a great point, which is one, having the belief, and sometimes it's hard to have that belief, like I said, because when nothing you're doing is working, it's hard to believe, right? And again, so I think being in an environment where you see other people winning just like you, and you have the exact same process and strategies, that goes a long way. I think also some of the quick wins that you're able to get once you're in the program, like, wow, within 48 hours, my resume got so much better. That gives you more belief, right? Oh, wow,
Yep.
within like the first week, I got 8 to 10 offers with private equity firms. Okay, that gives you more belief. And then you just build on that more and
Yes.
more over time, and it's momentum, right? And then now you're like, now you're in a groove, and you're like, okay, I can actually do this, and that's huge, right? And then I think, like you said, like, look, the reality is most of us, when we think about our future selves, we don't really want to be average. I think it's fair to say most of us, like, we want to live an extraordinary life. We don't want to be average. However, at the same time, most people aren't willing to do things that do the things that you need to do to not be average. Like, most
Yeah,
people are only
exactly.
most people are only willing to do the things that most people are already doing. And if you're only willing to do the things that the average people are doing, then you probably get an average outcome.
Yep.
Like, because otherwise, everyone would already be doing it. Like,
Yeah,
that's
exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that's great advice. Guys, if you're still listening to this, like, to wrap things up, I mean, there's so many good nuggets in here. I have so many kind of like key takeaways, but I think the biggest thing for me that I took away from this, is, look, even if you come from a background or a profile where you feel like you're at a disadvantage, or maybe you're a community college transfer, maybe you're starting late in the process, maybe, I don't know, maybe you don't know anyone around you who's done this, people who's gotten into banking. It's easy to just kind of like fold your hand, or have that self-doubt, and let that stop you from pursuing the goals that you really have. um, don't do that. Like, rather, what you should do is reach out and get the help that you need, and at least just like get some advice. Like Sandalina said, like, what's the worst that can happen? You get some free advice for an hour, right?
Yeah.
And maybe after that, if you're still not convinced and you still don't think you can do it, then don't do it, right? But maybe after you get some advice, you realize that you can do it, and you want that help. Then, if it's a good fit, which is not always going to be, but if it is a good fit, um, we're absolutely happy to help you, right? Because, again, like I said, like, we don't want to work with people that aren't willing to do the work, because then we're not going to be able to get you the results if you don't do the work, right? But, like, look, if you're willing to do the work, you have the work ethic, you're resilient, and you're ambitious, and you have big goals, and all you're lacking is the know-how. All you're lacking is kind of just like a little. You just need a little bit of guidance to point you in the right direction. Then that's exactly what we're here to provide, right? So if that's what you're looking for, what you can do to just have that free strategy session is you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST, so you go to wallstmastermind.com/apply. And we'll just hop on with you. Someone on our team will talk to you. We'll learn more about your situation, like, hey, what are your goals? What are you trying to do? And also, what are the challenges that you're currently having, right? And then, depending on what you tell us, we'll give you our best advice on what we think we would do if we were in your shoes, and lay out some sort of game plan that either you implement with our help, or maybe you take it and you go implement it on your own if you think you can do that, right? So, um, again, we look forward to talking to all of you, hopefully. But other than that, Sandalina, I want to thank you again for taking so much time to talk to us and just share your advice with people who are who are going through the process now. And I think, look, you're obviously, and you're going to be an inspiration for a lot of people, hopefully, and this could be this could really make a big difference for them. So I can't wait to see kind of like all the success that you have. I feel like you're gonna crush it in New York. I don't know, like, knowing what I know about you and your personality and stuff like that, I just feel like you feel kind of like a more of a New York person to me than a West Coast person, to be
Yeah.
honest.
I can't wait for New York. Thank you so much, Sam. Not just for all the nice things you just said, but for everything. Like, you're the man. Thank you.
No, absolutely. And it was really fun working with you. And look, even now that you're done this process, like, don't be a stranger, right? Like,
Of
I'm
course.
sure if there's other things that you need help with, I'm always here. You know how to reach me. So one Slack message away. So,
Yep.
all right, guys, that'll be it for today. And thank you guys for tuning in. And we'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. All right. Talk soon. Bye. Did I stop recording?
I think it's still recording.